So just a warning before we start this one that it's going to cover some pretty nasty moral subject matters, so it may sort of ignite your inner crusader as we go along.
Give me a trigger warning.
Yeah, I'm giving a trigger warning because this guy talks about some nasty S.
Okay.
Yeah, so a recent a university professor at the State University of New York, University Fredonia. I know,
that needs to be cut down.
Those Yanks, Christ, has got himself into a little bit of trouble recently after having said some rather inappropriate things on some podcasts that got leaked. Well, not even necessarily leaked. I don't necessarily know the original source for the first podcast, but we've got clips for it. But they're online now, and people are very, very angry at some of the things that he said. I can see that you've already noticed.
I have begun to read
some of his favourite subjects to cover, but I will not mention them right now because we will return to them. So the man is Stephen Kirshner, who is a distinguished teaching professor in the philosophy department at State University of New York at Fredonia, and an attorney. He focuses on applied ethics and political philosophy. So that's where we'll stop right there. If we move along.
Remember the Antifa bike log guy?
Yes.
He was also an ethics professor.
Oh, wow. What a surprise. Well, the weird thing we'll discover about this guy is that I'm sure politically, this guy would actually put himself at the other end from Antifa, which shocks me because this guy, as we'll find out, considers himself a libertarian. So I've managed to finally find the stereotype, the straw man libertarian, as we'll see here. So this has all come from Libs of TikTok. I need to thank Rory for putting me through the torture because he sent me a link to this particular thread. And I just had to go down the rabbit hole because, as you can see here, Libs of TikTok unearthed all of this, put it in a big thread. Professor says an adult wanting to have sex with a kid is accepted as being wrong, but it's not obvious to me that it is in fact wrong. Let's play the clip from here, just so we can hear it in his own words.
FBI, open up.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that an adult male wants to have sex with a 12-year-old girl. Imagine that she's a willing participant. A very standard, very widely held view that there's something deeply wrong about this, and it's wrong independent of it being criminalized. It's not obvious to me that is in fact wrong. I think this is a mistake, and I think that exploring why it's a mistake will tell us not only things about adult child sex and statutory rape, but also about fundamental principles of morality.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. So yes, in his eyes, finding a 12-year-old who is a willing participant, as if that scenario could exist, to have sex with an adult man is only seen as being wrong, but it's not obvious to him.
Can't figure out what might be wrong with that line of logic.
But yes, people think it's wrong independent of the law. I certainly do, and I'm sure you do as well.
How does the 12-year-old consent?
Well,
have you determined this?
That's a question that he's decided that he's going to answer. But I don't
What's he saying? My child bride agrees that it's fine.
Yes, inshallah. I don't need some academic, philosophical, or scientific reason to understand that this is wrong. I can simply intuit it, and I don't need you to tell me, and I don't need anybody to start to question the foundations of that intuition that I feel inside of me. But that's not the worst thing he says. One of the worst things he says is probably this one that I'm going to show now. If we move along. If you want to play the clip, Michael, and sorry about this, Callum.
Well, there's a couple of things to say here. One is, even if you are looking for a threshold, let's say there's a threshold. I'm making this number up, but let's say it's at age 8. Still, that tells you that some adult child sex is permissible. Second, the notion that it's wrong even with a 1-year-old is not quite obvious to me. There are reports in some cultures of grandmothers filleting the baby boys to calm them down when they're colicky. Now, I don't know if this is true, but this is sort of widely reported as occurring in at least one culture, and it working, that the grandmothers believe this actually works. If this were to be true, again, I don't know it to be true.
Yes, so because in some cultures I've heard about grandmas filleting their babies, which is disgusting in and of itself and brings back some quite empire feelings within me that we need to go and sort these people out, that makes it fine. That means that you are morally justified to have sex with a 1-year-old. He is an Ian Watkins baby rapist apologist.
Also, that first part of his argument made absolutely no sense, even within his own framework, because he argued that he picked an age of consent number at random. He said 8. And then he said that still allows child-adult rape to take place?
There's no explanation given for that.
Does he not understand what the point of the age of consent is? It's to differentiate between the children and the adults, because children can't consent and the adults can.
Well, he's going to be... Well, Callum, are you ready to have your understanding of consent itself and the idea of the age of consent rocked by this next clip?
Don't need it to be, but...
Well, it's going to, so let's play this one, Michael.
They might think that children can't be willing things in general. It's an odd view in that they seem to will things all the time. They will participation in kickball. They will showing up, participating in the bat mitzvah lessons. So there's all sorts of things that they will. You might think, well, maybe there's something distinct about sex that they can't really understand it. It's not clear to me that what they're not getting at is consent. I suspect what they want to say is, okay, they're willing participants, they're voluntary participants. They have some understanding what's going on, not understanding we do, but some understanding, but they haven't consented. Perhaps that's so, but that's a different claim from their being unwilling. There's just lots of activities that children engage in that they don't understand all that well. For example, when you first show up to participate in a judo tournament or you prepare for your bat mitzvah, I mean, you have a rough idea, but
I really
not clear how much you fully understand it.
Someone mentioned mitzvah prepare before this guy gets to mention it. But
Yeah.
Okay, so children have a will. Therefore, as a society, we should take no steps to try and stop easily foreseeable harm.
And also, because imagine you have a child, Callum, and you force them to maybe go to a football club that they don't want to at first. According to him, ethically and morally, that's no different from coercing them or tricking them or just forcing them
Being a nonce.
into having sex with you. Yes. According to him, despite the fact children don't have
I'm getting very suspicious of professors of ethics very quickly.
I know. Children don't really have a point of reference for the consequences of their actions. They don't understand necessarily that something is going to be good or bad for them. But you as an adult do have that knowledge. You have that wisdom that you carry within you from your experience. And you should know
Also
that...
the responsibility.
Yeah, and the responsibility. But you should know that, if you're forcing your kid to maybe do something they don't want, like football, that's going to have benefits for them later in life. Yeah, I know.
He's on the sidelines going, well, that's basically rape.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm having to explain this. But yes, when you force them to do stuff like that, it has a benefit for them. You're teaching them discipline. You're maybe getting them to be more physically fit. The only benefit of that kind of relationship is for the adult. And it's vile that he would try and question that sort of logic. I don't want to play all of the clips because, honestly, I've not brought a bucket with me. But he also, if we move along... He suggests that if we don't know if sex with a minor is good or bad, it shouldn't be banned or condemned legally. And he says, if we're in a moral grey area, which he seems to have just made up, and you can see how he's using his sort of academic prowess and academic terms to try and manifest this grey area out of nowhere. He's found a grey area
because he's hard drive, mate.
Yeah, because he's just coloured in the grey area. He says we need to side with liberty, which is where the libertarian-leaning side comes from. Which is kind of a French conception of liberty.
Don't children have the liberty to be raped?
Yeah,
Shut up, libertarian.
Yeah. if it does not mean that you don't get to do what you want without consequences. It's not an infringement on your freedom to say you can't have sex with my child. Now get in the wood chipper. I mean, but this is where sort of
absolute state of libertarianism. Right? If this is what you've got, if this is what your discussions are ending up becoming.
This is really kind of sad and hard for me to do because I have some quite libertarian leanings myself.
When it comes to like the economy,
yeah, when it comes to the economy, but morally and principally, I'm pretty liberal conservative.
I imagine
type.
there are libertarians furiously typing right now. No, that's the anarchist types. But
yeah, I mean, to be fair, most libertarians I've encountered, most libertarians I've met, tend to have more conservative morals. They just don't want the government messing with the economy and the government infringing on their rights. Whereas this is where it goes all the way too far. And it's if the government or the state mandates that I can't do something because I distrust the government as an institution, that must mean that it's wrong for them to do that. Therefore, the act that they're outlawing is good.
Can I just murder people? It's my free will.
Yeah, I mean, are you going to restrict my freedom to just punch you in the face right now?
Yes.
Yes.
Now shut up.
Although, if this guy got punched in the face, I'm not advocating anything, YouTube.
Still getting his hard drive searched.
But yeah, and then if we move along, he actually tries to make the argument that there are evolutionary advantages to adult-child sexual relationships.
I don't care.
And he uses the example of bonobos do it, so why can't we?
I don't care.
I don't care.
Who would care?
He even says he's not sure what the benefit is, but he's sure that there is one. Great argument there, mate. What on earth?
Also, this Coke's great.
Yeah. Oh, has anybody tried these bath salts? Oh, my. And if we move along, there's some more stuff that he's appeared on a recent podcast. Well, I think recent, it was sometime last year, with a man called Thaddeus Russell. I think it was like midway through last year, so it shows how long it's taken for this sort of stuff to become unearthed, because up until this point, this guy's just no consequences been teaching your children,
Well, he's at university, isn't he?
Yeah, well, I would say to the people out there, it's still their children, even if they're in their early 20s, but kind of trying to take a sledgehammer to the very idea of the morality for the new generation. Obviously, hopefully, a quite small and confined section of society, but still, we know that ideas get disseminated through the universities out into the wider public.
Are you trying to make the argument that maybe nonsense shouldn't be at unis? Because that's a pretty simple one.
It's a very simple argument, and that's exactly what I'm saying. But yeah, let's play this clip just so that we can see the two of these people agreeing with one another.
Still the adult child sex. That's always a big seller.
Oh yeah. Well, that
I had good friends who said, "Are you crazy? Do not write that book."
man, listen, you're talking to a guy who for 25 years has been making arguments more or less in defense of adult child sex in classrooms. And I don't know if it's the same argument as yours, but I even authored a piece in the Daily Beast in which I called into question the age of consent laws, which is, and I brought to bear the arguments I was making in class. And I'm going to see whether they.
Yeah, it's just completely normal, just that reaction that you got there. And he just managed to find the one podcast host who agrees with him on all this. Good God. But yeah, if we move along, we can see here what it is we've got the Amazon link to the book that they were referring to, which is Stephen Kirshner's book, Pedophilia and Adult Child Sex, A Philosophical Analysis. It's been out since 2017.
But I know it's only got 2 ratings, and one of those is going to be him. But how's it still only got 2.5 stars?
I assume 1 star from the person who wasn't him, and 1 5-star from him. I'm a genius. He's got some other papers that we can flip through just to see how his
What?
his thought process. A liberal argument for slavery. We've got the abstract.
They are my property, after all.
A libertarian advocating for slavery. My God. The slavery contract.
States' rights.
Yeah, he's saying the slavery contract is not a rights violation since the right not to be enslaved and the right not to give out a benefit are waivable, and the conjunction of their voluntary waiver is not itself a rights violation. So he's saying that he's basically making the argument you can sell yourself into slavery if you agree. But
look, Mr. Lincoln, he sold himself. I swear it.
I got his signature right here.
Lincolnites BTFO'd.
I mean, honestly, to a certain degree, I can understand the argument of like, well, you could sell yourself into it. But as a society, where does that end, right?
It's so obvious that you could coerce someone into it.
Yeah, exactly.
They're a slave, so they can't say no now because they're a slave, so they don't have any rights.
Yeah, and that's the thing. If you sell yourself into slavery, well, does that then give them carte blanche to do anything to you?
Can
well,
they
you
ever
sold
opt out?
yourself into. Yeah, can you opt out? And also, given the rest of his morality, you could call it, do you also give children the moral authority to be able to sell themselves into slavery? I can only assume yes. There's more papers if we move along. There's one that's a very familiar subject to him. The moral status of harmless adult child sex. Harmless. This is how he views it.
Again, FBI, please, if you could do anything with your time.
An unsurprising paper coming up next, the paradox of consent. which is stated, as a practical matter, attorneys, judges, legislators, physicians, and sex partners should not treat consent as morally significant, except perhaps as defeasible evidence of what makes another person's life go better. Which I don't understand that argument, but I can totally understand whatever motivated reasoning he might have for completely dismissing the idea of consent.
You know what's funny? You know what's J-Reg? You know, I've mentioned him a lot.
I've watched a little bit of him since you sent me Anprim.
Yeah, when he roleplays himself as an anarcho-capitalist, even the anarcho-capitalist caricature he plays isn't as extreme as this. Because the anarcho-capitalist, there's a scene in which he plays it and he goes, oh, it's not pedophilia, it's a febophilia. And tries to defend it, and he's like, oh, it is. Oh, never mind. No.
Whereas this guy's absolutely like, pedophilia, yeah, it's got evolutionary benefits.
But also, he's getting to the point, because he was arguing, and then he was like, yeah, consent itself isn't really important. Rape, slavery, and being a pedo, that's his philosophy, right?
Well, he might go even further than that, because his next paper is literally the case against responsibility and morality.
The Barbarian Weekly has published this or something.
I don't know. We feel that people act rightly or wrongly, make the world better or worse, and are virtuous or vicious. These policies are central to our justifying how we see the world and treat others. In this book, I argue that our views on these matters, except love, are false. I wonder why he wants to keep love in there. I swear, Your Honour, I love the child.
That doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't.
No,
Get in the wood chip.
Now, nicely look at this wall.
Yeah. So put on the blindfold, stand against the wall. But yeah, I can say, this guy is the absolute straw man of the libertarian, come to life. I don't know if H-Bomber guy cast some black magic spell or something that suddenly willed this person into existence, but I finally found an example of this guy. And it's awful. It's awful. But I think he does posture like a libertarian, but he argues like a Frenchman.
Just asking questions, bro.
I know, I'm just asking questions, man. What is consent? Does it even exist if I can ask the question if it exists? But it does paint a picture, doesn't it? So all of that put together means that this guy wants to justify why it's fine for him to have child sex slaves and still be considered a good person. That's absolutely where all of this is leading up to. They sold themselves into my possession, Your Honour.
I might be a rapist nonce with slaves, but at least I'm not rude.
But we can move along as well. There's just a document I found of other works that he's done, including papers like Love is Independent of Moral Responsibility. How can I rape her if I'm married to her, Your Honour? In Defense of Asian Romantic Preference.
No, you'd be arguing like, I may be raping her against her will, but at least I'm in love with her.
Yeah. Love comes in many forms. And does the pro-life position entail the permissibility of assassinating abortion doctors? Which is just a very strange question to be asking in the first place. But you can see there, as Carl and I have discussed previously when it comes to like height and talking about how most morality is post hoc reasoning, these all seem to be post hoc justifications for his kinks, fetishes, and perversions. And now the university, after this has been all put out into the public, has issued a statement saying SUNY Fredonia is aware of a video posted online involving one of its professors. The views are expressed by the professor are reprehensible and do not represent the values of SUNY Fredonia in any way, shape, or form. They are solely the professor's views. The matter is being reviewed. There's a problem there, though. We saw his description off the university website at the beginning of this segment.
Because he's still there.
Yes, if we return to it and scroll down, the part that I chose to miss out is that they point out he's written 100 articles and book chapters on such diverse topics as abortion, adult child sex, hell, most valuable player, pornography, punishment, sexual fantasy, slavery, and torture. So they know. They already knew.
This is not a shock to them.
Yeah, this is the same situation as that communist teacher in the primary school who was unveiled by Project Veritas, where the school just went, well, we didn't know. It's like he had a picture of Stalin on his wall and Mao.
In the classroom.
In the classroom.
For the last 2 years. You tell me you've never been in there.
You've
never seen that room.
Are you telling me the head of this university has never just knocked on by when this guy's been giving a lecture and heard something about how morality doesn't exist and that's why I can have sex with children?
To be honest, I imagine that's all he talks about as well.
Yeah, I mean, when you start to get into that sort of level of degeneracy, I don't understand how that isn't the thing that is occupying his headspace the whole time. The other unfortunate thing There are more. There's more stuff that libs of TikTok included in the thread. If we move along, he suggests that sex with a minor might only be harmful because of the way that society reacts to it. Once again, this guy, Thaddeus Russell, smiling, nodding along the whole time. And we've got, I think, one more clip to go through. If you want to move along, Michael, and we can just watch this next clip as well, where he once again goes back to his argument on why it's okay.
The right infringement case that we don't get, they can't give their valid consent, and therefore it's wrong in virtue of being a right infringement. And there's a view that it's exploitative, that even if it's not harmful, and even if it's not a right infringement, it's somehow an exploitation.
Right. I've heard all these. Yes. Okay.
Right. So those are the three dominant arguments. And none of these convince me. So me neither. The harm argument, well, there's the actual empirical controversy over this.
Sure. Yeah.
On the rights-based argument, I think, look, we make children do all sorts of things that we don't want to do. Right?
Thank you.
We make them go to church. We make them go to the temple. We tell them to go to school. They got to go to the dentist. They got to go to their sister's ballet recital. And we don't care what they say. And they want to do things. We say no, right? They say, I want to stay up and watch, Creature Feature on WPIX until, 2 in the morning. We say, well, it's tough.
That is all a child's life is coercion.
Right, that's right.
Is coercion by adults often to make the child do something for the adult's pleasure only.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You say, you're going to go to your great uncle's funeral, even though you want to go, and even though it's not in your interest.
Right.
So the rights-based argument's a little bit hard to follow.
Sorry.
In addition,
sorry, you don't want to go to your uncle's funeral, then you'll have to suck my dick.
And
What the hell was that?
Yep.
So what? Oh God.
Michael pointing out the podcast is called Unregistered, but I have a feeling that neither of them are.
No, I bet they're both. Well, they should be on the bloody
They
register.
absolutely should be after this.
Kids have to do anything. There are lots of things they don't like, so I might as well have sex with. What the fuck is wrong with you?
I know.
I know. I'm sorry. I shouldn't be. But
No, it does really bring up those that feeling of noble crusade, doesn't it? If
we're gonna have to censor those out.
Oh yes, sorry. Yeah. If we move this next part along, there's just more stupid arguments made where he just says, "I don't think exploitation is wrongful," and this is the
also the point he made. He can't see a paradigm in which it can be exploitative. You don't see a paradigm in which a 10-year-old can be exploited by a 30-year-old.
You're an idiot if you actually believe that, and otherwise you're just a liar. And this is the person that he was on the podcast with, who agreed with every point that he had to make. A Thaddeus Russell, who is the founder of Renegade University, and shockingly has done podcasts with and actually has an event going on, I think either right now or before when this segment will air, with James Lindsay, who has been actually very good on Twitter at calling out people for doing groomer stuff.
Well, I expect as soon as James finds out, he'll mention it.
In schools.
Like, hey, buddy, so how many registers are you on?
Yeah, so I think perhaps, James, as much as I respect the work that you do, you should probably have looked into this guy, although I know you don't expect to associate with people who advocate for a lack of morality and justifying grooming, but I think now that all of this has come out, you may want to distance yourself from this guy.
Oh, no, call him up and be like, answer for your crimes. Like, what the hell is wrong with you? Just slowly explain to him why he should be in jail, if nothing else.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And I did have one last bit on the article that this guy, Thaddeus Russell, wrote about questioning the age of consent for the Daily Beast, because he mentioned that. But honestly, at this point, I don't want to go through any more of this because it's quite a long article. There may be a link for it that you can find if you want to check that out yourself. But I think we've seen enough here.
If you enjoyed that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to subscribe to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this episode, which is a premium podcast that Carl and Harry did together on scientific nonce advocacy, which, if nothing else, it will prove that science is not ethical. But if you also want to follow Harry, you can go to him on Getter and follow him at Harry Lotus Eater. Thank you and goodbye.